Good morning. After you've finished doing your research in Unit 4, it's time to move on to Unit 5, which we will address today, and that is the call to Christian service. You've seen how people were called. You see how Jesus called the disciples. In Unit 4, you were to compare and see how those things apply to you as an individual. And now we move on to the next stage, which is the call to Christian service. And it's a very important call. Biblically, there is a call to salvation, and we have that in Romans chapter 1, verse 6, and Romans chapter 8, verse 28, where it says, we are called to God's divine plan and purpose. And then a call to sanctification, completion and maturity. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 9. Call to full-time service, Christian service. Hebrews chapter 5 verse 4, Acts chapter 13 verse 2. Now, must understand the difference between commands and calls. Commands are for all Christians. Matthew 28 verses 18 to 20, Jesus said, go to all the world. He didn't just say it to a few, he said it to everybody. That was a command. It applies to every Christian. But calls are for a particular few. The call of God begins with a burden. It involves desire. Jeremiah chapter 20 verse 9. Is evidenced by fruit, is written in John chapter 15 verse 16. Some people are called immediately when converted, which was like the apostles, or suddenly and clearly, as in 1 Samuel 3:10, or it's gradually. There are at least 3 tests of a genuine call of God. Let's look at those. The compulsion in the form of conviction, competence in evidence, 2 Timothy 2:24, the church's observation of your fitness to serve. Some people sometimes have to leave a church because they don't think you're fit to serve, and you know darn well that you're supposed to be serving God, so you have to go somewhere else because you have to trust God, not man. Some questions about the call of God. Are you genuinely converted? You must know that for sure. Are you growing in maturity in your Christian life? You have a need to do a self-audit on that one. Pure motives. Requires rigid self-examination. Why are you doing this? What's the benefit to you? Is there any benefit, or are you doing it because God has called you? Possesses physical and mental abilities to serve. You must have a love for people. Must have a love for the Church of Jesus Christ. Must have a love for Jesus. What evidence of burden for the lost? Successful fruit in past ministry. Are you prepared to go? Because God says go, you must be prepared to go wherever he sends you. And that is, you must be willing to be prepared. God's calling is enablement. Matthew chapter 16 verse 18. A call to full-time service is a call to prepare. The disciples spent 3 years in preparation before they were commissioned to serve. Sometimes God calls through another person or a vision, as was the case with Paul, where he saw the vision, come over to Macedonia and help us. A need alone is not a call. Enter a call. Something's just happened. We've lost the power. Power's just gone off.
फ्रिज खोलनी और दो खपा देंगे तो काम चल रही है
Well, that was a big surprise. Out in the middle of nowhere, we had a power failure. So let's continue. As I said, a need alone is not a call. Enter a call. not for what you can get out of it, but what God can get out of you. And he called, it says, but only a few are chosen. But all are bound to glorify and serve God. Every disciple is a minister and an evangelist. Every Christian should be a minister and an evangelist. They give their testimonies in public. That's why we are all challenged to be always willing to give our testimonies, in season and out of season. Because when we give our testimonies, Satan is defeated by the word of our testimony. A calling is an undeserved honor. Gather information, weigh the pros and cons, pursue wisdom and single-mindedness, decide in faith. The word of God must confirm a calling, as it said in 1 Timothy chapter 3. So we have to now evaluate our call. This is the assignment. The students will review the evidence of the call of God upon the lives of the people studied in all the previous units, with a view of directing their findings inwardly towards their own personal lives. Romans 8:28, the second part, the B part, states that God calls each of us by name and according to his divine plan and according to his divine purpose. So he calls each of us by name and he calls each of us according to his divine plan and according to his divine purpose. Therefore, conclusion, God must have a plan for you because he's called you by name. He has a plan and a purpose for you, so you have to find out what it is. So you have to use the examples that you've seen already of the other people called in the other previous 4 assignments, units, and then try and put those into practice in your life. Therefore, the students will examine in their own lives, based upon the evidence mentioned above, and prepare a confidential report, which will only be read by the student and their respective teacher. This report will detail the student's own experiences. Based upon these experiences and the criteria above, the student will A. Identify the call of God upon their life. B. How that call was made. C. How that call was confirmed. D. Define the specific steps the student has taken or will now take to put that call of God into effect in their lives. That's quite important. You have to be able to identify those steps because those steps have been identified in the lives of each and every other student and each and every other person recorded in the scriptures. And that concludes the subject, the call of God. We will start looking at cttnbc 002 in our next series of teachings.